Monsters, myths, nightmares, vampires, werewolves, zombies, and more. Creatures that inspired modern monsters are more than just scary stories. They've haunted us for centuries, lurking in shadows, feeding on fear. But where did these legends come from? What sparked humanity's obsession with blood drinkers, shapeshifters, and the undead? These mythical creatures didn't just appear in horror movies. They were born from ancient fears, real events, and chilling beliefs. What if the truth behind them is more terrifying than fiction? Prepare to uncover the origins of mythical creatures that shape today's modern monsters. From ancient graveyards to the depths of the sea, the truth awaits. Are you ready to face what haunts our darkest nightmares? The monsters are waiting. Why do humans create monsters? Monsters have been a part of human stories for thousands of years. But why do we create them? The answer is simple: fear. Humans have always feared the unknown, whether it's the dark forest, the vast ocean, or death itself. Monsters help explain what we can't understand, turning natural fears into tangible threats. When humans had no scientific answers for disasters or death, they created myths to cope. In ancient times, natural disasters and diseases were often seen as punishments from the gods. A sudden death or a strange illness might be blamed on a vampire, witch, or werewolf. Myths helped people cope with tragedies by giving them a cause, even if that cause was terrifying. They allowed people to externalize fear, placing blame on an external entity rather than the unpredictability of nature. Monsters also reflect cultural anxieties. For example, during plagues, vampire legends spread across Europe because people linked the undead to disease. Werewolf trials emerged during periods of famine and fear. Pop culture took these ancient stories and turned them into horror icons, twisting myths into entertainment. But they didn't lose their core meaning. They still reflect a collective fear of the unknown. Throughout history, as societies developed, their monsters adapted. When people feared plagues, vampires represented disease. When people feared nature's unpredictability, sea monsters represented the chaos of the ocean. Modern horror has simply taken those fears and shifted them toward zombies, symbolizing pandemics, or werewolves representing inner turmoil. So, the monsters we fear today are not random. They are reflections of generations of human fear and imagination. Their origins tell us a lot about what each era of humanity feared the most. But where did these myths come from, and how did they evolve? Let's start with vampires, one of the most enduring and terrifying creatures of folklore. Vampires, ancient blood drinkers. Vampires have terrified people for centuries, but their origins go far beyond the elegant figures seen in modern TV shows. One of the earliest vampire-like figures comes from ancient Mesopotamia. Lamashtu, a female demon, was believed to sneak into homes to suck the blood of infants and cause disease. Similarly, the figure of Lilith in Jewish folklore was said to prey on children, embodying the earliest fears of mysterious death. In ancient Greece, the myths of the Empusa and the Striges added to the vampire legacy. These winged creatures would stalk humans in the night, drinking their blood or consuming their flesh. Unlike the romanticized vampires of today, these beings were monstrous, gruesome, and deadly. Their stories spread through oral tradition, evolving as they crossed cultures and borders. During the medieval period in Eastern Europe, the fear of vampires exploded. Villagers believed that the dead could rise from their graves as revenants, spreading disease and death. Bodies suspected of vampirism were often exhumed and staked through the heart. Diseases like tuberculosis, which caused victims to waste away and cough blood, fueled these fears, making people believe they were under a vampire's curse. One historical figure often tied to the vampire myth is Vlad the Impaler, the ruthless ruler of Wallachia. Known for his brutal methods of execution, Vlad inspired Bram Stoker's Dracula, the novel that solidified the vampire as a symbol of fear and seduction. But the fear of vampires wasn't limited to fiction. There were real cases of mass hysteria, with entire villages exhuming graves to kill supposed vampires. Over time, vampires transformed from grotesque creatures of folklore into sophisticated, alluring predators. In the 19th century, literature like Dracula redefined them as aristocratic monsters. Modern adaptations, from Twilight to the Vampire Diaries, have made them cultural icons. But no matter how charming or romantic they appear today, vampires remain rooted in ancient fears of disease and death. Werewolves, the beast within. Werewolf legends are deeply ingrained in human history, with their earliest origins tracing back to Greek mythology. The story of Lycaon tells of a king who angered Zeus by serving him human flesh. As punishment, Zeus cursed him to transform into a wolf, setting the foundation for the myth of shape-shifting predators. But what makes werewolves fascinating is how their legends evolved to reflect humanity's fear of the inner beast. In medieval Europe, werewolf hysteria spread during times of famine and disease. Many people believe that werewolves were humans cursed by witches or possessed by evil spirits. Werewolf trials, similar to witch hunts, were common in Germany and France, where people were accused of transforming into wolves to attack livestock and children. Those accused often faced torture and execution. But what caused this hysteria? Historians suggest several explanations. One is ergot poisoning, a hallucinogenic mold that grows on rye and can cause delusions. Another explanation is rabies outbreaks, which made infected individuals behave aggressively and fear water, much like werewolf transformations in folklore. There's also the psychological disorder clinical lycanthropy, where people believe they are turning into animals. Pop culture has embraced the werewolf myth, portraying it as both terrifying and tragic. In films like The Wolfman, 1941, and TV shows like Teen Wolf, the werewolf represents inner conflict and transformation. The fear of losing control to the beast within is a theme that resonates across cultures and eras, making werewolves one of the most enduring symbols of terror. Despite their evolution in media, werewolves remain tied to the same fears they represented in ancient times. The fear of becoming something monstrous, uncontrollable, and dangerous. Zombies, walking corpses of Haitian legend. Before they became flesh-eating monsters in Hollywood films, zombies had a darker and more symbolic origin in Haitian Vodou. In this tradition, zombies were dead bodies reanimated by a sorcerer known as a Bakar, who would enslave them. The concept of zombies wasn't about cannibalism. It was about the horror of losing one's autonomy and becoming a mindless servant. This myth developed during Haiti's colonial period, where enslaved people feared not only death, but also eternal servitude. To them, becoming a zombie meant losing control over one's life even after death. This fear reflected the harsh realities of slavery and the loss of freedom. When Western culture discovered these myths, they transformed them into something more horrifying. George Romero's Night of the Living Dead, 1968, marked the birth of the modern zombie, mindless, flesh-eating, and relentless. This new interpretation of zombies mirrored societal fears, from nuclear fallout during the Cold War to modern concerns about pandemics. Real-world science also plays a role in zombie lore. Parasitic fungi like cordyceps can take over the bodies of insects, controlling their movements in ways eerily similar to zombie behavior. Rabies, a disease that causes aggression and confusion, has also been linked to the fear of the dead returning to life. Zombies represent a breakdown of society and humanity's fear of losing control. Today, zombies dominate pop culture, appearing in video games, TV shows like The Walking Dead, and countless films. But their core message remains the same. They remind us that death is not always the end, and that the greatest threat may be losing ourselves.
Ghouls, flesh-eating monsters. The idea of ghouls comes from Arabian mythology, where Al Ghul was a creature that prowled graveyards and ate corpses. These monsters embodied humanity's fear of death and the desecration of bodies. Their presence in Islamic folklore was a warning against grave robbing and disrespecting the dead. In European folklore, ghouls evolved into beings that lurk underground, feeding on human flesh. Their terrifying nature made them popular in literature and games like Dungeons and Dragons. Over time, they became more monstrous, often depicted as decayed creatures crawling out of graves. Ghouls symbolize the fear of the unknown after death. What happens when the dead don't rest in peace? This question haunted ancient cultures and continues to do so today. They represent our dread of death's corruption and the terrifying possibility of something unnatural beyond the grave. Modern horror, including shows like The Walking Dead, continues to use ghoul-like creatures to scare audiences. But the original myth of the ghoul still remains powerful, reminding us that some things should be left buried. Sea monsters, leviathans of the deep. For sailors in ancient times, the ocean was a place of mystery and danger. Myths of sea monsters like the Hebrew Leviathan described colossal creatures capable of destroying ships. In Norse mythology, Jormungandr, the world serpent, was so large it could encircle the earth and sink ships. Greek mythology added more terror with Scylla and Charybdis, sea monsters that preyed on sailors in the narrow straits of the Mediterranean. Stories of these creatures helped explain shipwrecks and disappearances in dangerous waters. Real-life encounters with giant squids may have fueled these legends. Sea monsters became symbols of chaos, embodying the fear of the unknown lurking beneath the waves. Even today, ocean mysteries captivate us. Giant squids and deep-sea creatures inspire modern adaptations like the Kraken in Pirates of the Caribbean and Godzilla. These ancient myths remind us that the sea holds secrets we may never fully uncover. With 80% of the ocean unexplored, who knows what might be hiding beneath the waves? Why these myths still haunt us? Monsters endure because they help us confront our deepest fears. They give shape to abstract anxieties, whether it's disease, death, or betrayal. By creating these creatures, humans have found ways to cope with the unknown for thousands of years. They're reflections of survival, warnings against danger, and reminders of humanity's fragile existence. But these myths aren't just about fear. They also reflect humanity's creativity and cultural storytelling. Vampires, werewolves, zombies, and ghouls have all evolved alongside us, adapting to reflect the issues of their time, from plagues to modern pandemics. They reveal the power of oral traditions and how stories change to suit new generations. Perhaps what makes these myths so powerful is that they never really go away. They're constantly reinvented, always finding new ways to scare us. Whether it's ancient demons or modern reboots, the monsters of history remain relevant because they address universal fears. Think about this. Are monsters something we created to protect ourselves from the unknown, or did ancient experiences inspire them? It's possible that early encounters with nature, disease, or unexplained phenomena gave birth to these myths, hinting at something deeper. What do you believe? Are these myths just stories, or do they hint at something more? Let us know what you think in the comments. Which monster do you fear most, and why? If you enjoyed uncovering the dark origins of these creatures, you won't want to miss our next deep dive into forgotten myths. Subscribe to Ancient Chronicles and join us on a journey into the shadows of ancient history. Who knows? Maybe the real monsters are still out there waiting.